The sound of a gunshot pierced the stillness of the dawn, sending a flock of crows scattering into the pale sky as Madeline Kane's heart stopped in her chest. She knew, even before she ran outside, what her husband had done. It was 1873 in the small town of Ukiah, California, where the morning fog still clung to the hills surrounding the valley. Madeline's breath made clouds in the chilled air as she dashed across the yard, her long nightgown catching on brambles, her dark hair streaming behind her. When she reached the edge of their property, she saw Vernon Kane standing with his rifle still smoking, a cruel smile twisting his face as he looked down at the crumpled form on the ground. "No!" Madeline screamed, falling to her knees beside the beautiful silver wolf that had been her companion, her protector, her spirit guide for the past 3 years. "That beast has been stealing my chickens for the last time," Vernon spat, nudging the wolf's body with his boot. "Should have done this months ago." "She never touched your chickens," Madeline sobbed, gathering the wolf's head into her lap, feeling the weak pulse beneath her fingertips. "It was the foxes. You know it was the foxes." "Don't talk back to me, woman," Vernon growled, grabbing her arm and yanking her to her feet. "That thing's been watching me for months. Unnatural the way it follows you, like some kind of witch's familiar." Madeline pulled away, stumbling backward. "She's not dead," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The wolf's chest still rose and fell in shallow breaths. The bullet had torn through her shoulder but somehow missed her heart. "It will be by nightfall," Vernon said dismissively, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Now get inside and make my breakfast. I've got a meeting with Johnson about those mining rights." As he walked away, Madeline knelt again by the wolf. "I won't let you die," she promised, tears falling onto the silver fur. "I won't let him win this time." For 3 years, Madeline had been trapped in a marriage that had quickly revealed itself to be nothing but a prison. Vernon Kane had seemed charming, successful, and kind during their brief courtship. Her parents had been thrilled when the prominent businessman had asked for their 20-year-old daughter's hand in marriage. But the mask had fallen away on their wedding night, revealing a cruel, controlling man who saw Madeline as nothing more than a possession. The wolf had appeared just after Vernon had broken Madeline's wrist in a fit of rage. She'd fled into the woods behind their house, cradling her injured arm, and had collapsed against a tree trunk. Through her tears, she'd seen the magnificent silver creature watching her from between the trees. Instead of fear, Madeline had felt an immediate connection, as if the wolf understood her pain. From that day, the wolf had lingered near their property, always just out of sight when Vernon was around, but appearing to Madeline when she was alone, offering silent companionship and strange comfort. Now, looking at the wounded animal, Madeline made a decision. She couldn't save herself, yet Vernon had made sure she had nowhere to go, no money of her own, no friends left in town, but she would save this wolf. She glanced back toward the house. Vernon would be waiting for his breakfast, growing angrier with each passing minute. If she didn't return soon, the punishment would be severe. But for once, Madeline didn't care. She gathered the wolf into her arms, surprised at how light the creature seemed, and half carried, half dragged her toward the old shed at the farthest corner of their property. The shed was dilapidated and rarely used. Vernon never went there. It would be safe, at least for a little while. Inside, Madeline laid the wolf on an old horse blanket and examined the wound. The bullet had gone clean through the shoulder. With trembling hands, she tore strips from her nightgown to staunch the bleeding. "I'll come back," she promised, stroking the wolf's head. "I'll bring food and medicine." When Madeline finally returned to the house, Vernon was waiting for her, his face dark with anger. She braced herself for the blow that always came. "Where have you been?" he demanded, grabbing her by the hair. "I was burying the wolf," she lied, wincing at the pain. "I didn't want it to attract scavengers." Vernon studied her face, looking for deceit, then shoved her toward the stove. "Get to work and wash yourself. You smell like that filthy animal." For the next 3 days, Madeline tended to the wolf in secret. She stole scraps of meat from the kitchen, borrowed healing herbs from the garden, and slipped away whenever Vernon was occupied with business or passed out from drinking. The wolf grew stronger each day, her intelligent eyes following Madeline's movements with an almost human understanding. On the 4th day, disaster struck. Madeline returned to the shed to find Vernon standing over the wolf, his rifle aimed at the animal's head. "You lied to me," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You've been hiding this beast, nursing it back to health." "Vernon, please," Madeline begged, reaching for him. He turned the rifle on her instead. "I've tolerated your disobedience for too long, Madeline. It ends today." Before he could pull the trigger, the wolf lunged forward with unexpected strength, catching Vernon's arm in her jaws. He screamed, the rifle firing harmlessly into the ceiling of the shed. In the chaos that followed, Madeline grabbed the gun and struck Vernon across the temple with the butt of it. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Madeline stood frozen, the rifle still in her hands, staring at her husband's still form. The wolf limped to her side, leaning against her legs as if to support her. "I have to leave," Madeline whispered. "I have to get away before he wakes up." The decision was made in an instant. She ran back to the house, grabbed what few possessions mattered to her, a locket containing a picture of her mother, a small bag of sewing supplies, and the hidden tin where she'd been collecting coins Vernon had carelessly left lying around. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to get her to the next town. As she was about to leave, Madeline hesitated, then went to Vernon's desk. She broke open the locked drawer with a letter opener and found what she was looking for: the deed to their house, some banknotes, and most importantly, the small pistol Vernon kept hidden there. She took everything, stuffing it into a cloth bag along with some food from the kitchen. When she returned to the shed, Vernon was stirring. Madeline felt a spike of panic but forced herself to remain calm. The wolf growled low in her throat, standing protectively in front of Madeline. "You'll never survive out there," Vernon muttered, touching the gash on his head. "You're nothing without me, nothing." "I'd rather be nothing than your prisoner," Madeline replied, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "Don't follow me, Vernon. I've taken the pistol." His eyes widened at that, and Madeline felt a small flicker of satisfaction. For the first time since they'd married, she saw fear in her husband's eyes. Without another word, Madeline left the shed, the wolf limping alongside her. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to put as much distance between herself and Vernon as possible before he regained his senses fully. They traveled through the woods, avoiding the main roads. The wolf, despite her injury, seemed to know which way to go, stopping occasionally to wait for Madeline to catch up. By nightfall, they had reached a small stream about 5 miles from the Kane property. "We should rest," Madeline said to the wolf, who was panting heavily, her injured shoulder clearly causing her pain. "Just for a few hours. Then we'll keep going." She settled beneath a large oak tree, and to her surprise, the wolf curled up beside her, resting her head on Madeline's lap. Despite her fear, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Madeline felt a strange sense of peace as she stroked the wolf's silver fur. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, and for the first time in years she almost believed it. Morning came with the sound of distant hoofbeats. Madeline jolted awake, fear clutching at her heart. The wolf was already on her feet, ears pricked, staring in the direction of the sound. Vernon must have gathered men to search for her. "We have to move," Madeline urged, gathering her meager belongings. But the wolf didn't budge. Instead, she let out a soft whine, then turned and limped slowly in the direction of the hoofbeats. "What are you doing?" Madeline hissed, trying to call the wolf back. "They'll kill you." The wolf paused, looking back at Madeline with those intelligent eyes, then continued forward. After a moment's hesitation, Madeline followed, staying hidden among the trees. The wolf seemed to know something she didn't. Through the foliage, Madeline could make out a lone rider on a chestnut horse, moving slowly along the stream. It wasn't Vernon or any of the men who worked for him. This stranger was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and a battered hat pulled low over his face. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a rifle strapped to his saddle and what appeared to be animal skins tied behind him. A hunter, perhaps. Madeline's heart sank. If he was a hunter, he'd likely shoot the wolf on sight. She tried to call the animal back, but it was too late. The wolf had emerged from the trees, standing in the middle of the path, staring directly at the rider. To Madeline's amazement, the man didn't reach for his rifle. Instead, he reined in his horse and dismounted slowly, speaking in a low, gentle voice. "Well now, what have we here?" he said, crouching down to the wolf's level. "You're hurt, aren't you, girl?" The wolf allowed him to approach, even lowering her head as he cautiously extended his hand. The man examined the wound on her shoulder, his brow furrowing. "That's a bullet wound," he muttered. "Someone's been using you for target practice." Madeline couldn't believe what she was seeing. The wolf, who had always been wary of everyone except her, was allowing this stranger to touch her. And the man was treating the wild animal with more gentleness than Vernon had ever shown to Madeline. Before she could decide what to do, the wolf turned and looked directly at where Madeline was hiding. The man followed the wolf's gaze, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Who's there?" He called out, "Show yourself." Madeline hesitated, then stepped out from behind the tree, Vernon's pistol clutched in her shaking hand. "Don't hurt her," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She's with me." The man's eyes widened slightly, taking in Madeline's disheveled appearance, the bruise on her cheek that Vernon had left days earlier, and the pistol in her hand. "I'm not going to hurt either of you, madam," he said, raising his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "My name's Benjamin Tucker. I trap and hunt in these parts. I was just concerned about this wolf's injury." Madeline didn't lower the pistol. "She was shot by my husband." Benjamin's expression hardened at that, his blue eyes flicking to the bruise on her face. "I see," he said simply. "And now you're running from him." It wasn't a question, but Madeline nodded anyway. "He'll be looking for me." Benjamin glanced at the wolf, who had settled down at Madeline's feet, then back at Madeline. "That wound needs proper tending or it might fester," he said. "And you look like you could use a hot meal and rest somewhere safe." "Why would you help us?" Madeline asked suspiciously. Benjamin shrugged. "I've never been one to turn my back on those in need, human or animal. My cabin's about 2 hours' ride from here. Your wolf friend can rest there while she heals, and you can decide your next move without looking over your shoulder." Madeline studied him carefully. Benjamin Tucker appeared to be in his early 30s, with sun-weathered skin and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. There was nothing threatening in his manner, and the wolf seemed to trust him, which counted for a lot in Madeline's estimation. "He'll kill us both if he finds us," she warned. "Then we'd best make sure he doesn't," Benjamin replied simply. "Will you come with me?" After a moment's consideration, Madeline nodded. She had few options, and her instincts told her this man could be trusted. "Thank you," she said, finally lowering the pistol. Benjamin smiled then, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Can I ask your name, madam?" "Madeline," she answered, deliberately leaving off her married name. "And this is—" She paused, realizing she had never given the wolf a name. It had seemed presumptuous somehow to name a wild creature that had chosen to befriend her. "Silver," she finished, looking down at the wolf's gleaming coat. "Her name is Silver." Benjamin nodded as if approving of the choice. "It suits her. Now we should get moving. Your husband likely started searching at first light." He helped Madeline onto his horse, then carefully lifted Silver, mindful of her injury. The wolf allowed this handling with surprising docility. Benjamin led the horse on foot, setting a brisk pace through the woods, following trails Madeline wouldn't have noticed on her own. True to his word, after about 2 hours they reached a small clearing where a sturdy log cabin stood. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a small corral off to the side held 2 more horses. "My brother's visiting," Benjamin explained, seeing Madeline's alarmed expression. "Adam's a doctor in Sacramento. He comes up every few months to check on me and hunt. It's good luck for us he can properly tend to Silver's wound." Inside the cabin, Adam Tucker proved to be as kind as his brother, if somewhat more talkative. After the initial surprise of Benjamin arriving with a battered woman and an injured wolf, he set to work immediately, cleaning and dressing Silver's wound while Benjamin prepared a meal. "The bullet went clean through the muscle," Adam explained as he worked. "Missed the bone and any major blood vessels. She's a lucky wolf. With rest and care, she should heal completely." "Thank you," Madeline said softly, watching as Silver lay surprisingly still under the doctor's ministrations. "It's not often I get to treat such an unusual patient," Adam replied with a smile. "Though I'd like to take a look at that wrist of yours next. It didn't set properly, did it?" Madeline glanced down at her left wrist, which had remained slightly crooked since Vernon broke it. "No," she admitted. "My husband didn't think it needed a doctor." Adam's expression darkened, but he said nothing, focusing instead on finishing Silver's bandage. When he was done, he gently examined Madeline's wrist, confirming it had healed incorrectly. "There's not much I can do now without re-breaking it," he said regretfully. "But I can give you some salve for the pain when it aches in cold weather." "That's kind of you," Madeline said, touched by the brothers' concern for her welfare. Over a simple but hearty meal of venison stew, Madeline told them her story how she'd married Vernon Kane at 20, believing she was entering a life of security and respect, only to discover she'd become property to a cruel man. She told them about Silver appearing after Vernon had broken her wrist, about the connection she felt with the wolf, and about Vernon's attempt to kill the animal. "Kane," Adam mused. "Vernon Kane from Ukiah. Owns half the businesses in town." Madeline nodded, her stomach clenching with fear. "Do you know him?" "Of him," Adam corrected. "He has a reputation that reaches as far as Sacramento. Not a good one, though he keeps up appearances well enough in public." "He'll be searching for you," Benjamin said, his expression grave. "A man like that doesn't let go of what he considers his property." "I know," Madeline whispered, looking down at Silver, who was sleeping peacefully by the fire. "But I couldn't stay. Not after what he did to Silver. Not after he threatened to kill me." "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need," Benjamin offered. "It's not much, but it's safe. Vernon Kane doesn't know me, and few people come this far into the hills." "I couldn't impose," Madeline began, but Adam cut her off. "It's hardly an imposition. Ben lives like a hermit up here. Some company would do him good." Benjamin shot his brother an exasperated look, but didn't contradict him. "The offer stands, Madeline, at least until Silver is well enough to travel." Madeline looked between the brothers, overwhelmed by their kindness. "Thank you," she said finally. "Just until Silver heals. Then I'll move on." That night, Madeline slept in Benjamin's bed while he took a bedroll on the floor. Adam slept in the small loft. Silver refused to leave Madeline's side, curling up next to the bed despite Adam's insistence that the wolf should rest by the fire. For the first time in years, Madeline fell asleep without fear tightening her chest. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she was safe. The next morning, Adam departed for Sacramento, promising to return in a few weeks to check on Silver's progress. Before he left, he took Madeline aside. "My brother is a good man," he told her quietly. "The best I know. He lives alone out here because of what happened during the war. It changed him, made him need the solitude. But don't mistake his quietness for indifference." "I won't," Madeline assured him. "He's been nothing but kind to me and Silver." Adam smiled. "Good. And don't worry about Vernon Kane. I'll make some inquiries, see what he's telling people about your disappearance. If he's publicly searching for you, I'll send word." After Adam's departure, Madeline and Benjamin settled into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. During the day, Benjamin taught Madeline about trapping and hunting, skills she'd never had reason to learn before. In return, she cooked and mended his clothes, which were in sore need of attention. Silver grew stronger each day, the wound healing cleanly under their care. The wolf divided her time between following Benjamin on his trap line, seeming to understand his work intuitively, and staying protectively close to Madeline. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Benjamin carving or repairing traps while Madeline sewed or read from the small collection of books he owned. Sometimes he would tell stories of his travels, of the places he'd seen during and after the war. Madeline found herself sharing stories too, of her childhood in Oregon before her family moved to California, of her dreams before they'd been subsumed by the nightmare of her marriage. 2 weeks passed in this peaceful coexistence. Madeline found herself smiling more, laughing even at Benjamin's dry humor and the antics of Silver, who seemed determined to catch a particular squirrel that frequented the clearing. The bruise on her face faded, and for the first time in years, she didn't flinch when someone raised a hand near her. Benjamin, too, seemed to relax in her presence. Where he had been reserved at first, he now spoke more freely, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. He was a man of few words, but Madeline found she valued each one all the more for their rarity. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Benjamin suddenly asked, "What will you do when Silver is fully healed?" Madeline looked up from her mending, surprised by the question. "I haven't decided," she admitted. "I can't go back to Ukiah, that's certain. I thought perhaps I might try to reach my cousin in Portland. She married well, and her husband might be willing to help me find employment." Benjamin nodded, his expression unreadable as he focused on the piece of wood he was whittling. "That seems sensible." Madeline studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Unless," she began hesitantly, "unless there's another option I haven't considered." Benjamin looked up then, his eyes meeting hers across the small space. "You could stay here," he said simply. Madeline's heart skipped a beat. "Here, with you, if you wanted to," Benjamin replied, his voice carefully neutral. "The cabin is small, but I could build another room. Or a separate cabin entirely, if you preferred your own space. Silver seems content here, and you've taken to the woods better than most city folk." "Are you asking me to stay as your housekeeper?" Madeline asked, needing to understand exactly what he was proposing. Benjamin set down his carving and gave her his full attention. "No, Madeline. I'm asking you to stay because I enjoy your company, because this cabin feels more like a home with you in it, because Silver isn't the only one who would miss you if you left." The simple honesty of his words took Madeline's breath away. There was no artifice in Benjamin Tucker, no hidden agenda. Just a man who had opened his home to her and now was opening his heart as well. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. You don't have to say anything now, Benjamin assured her. It's a big decision. Take time to think on it. Before Madeline could respond, Silver suddenly lifted her head from where she had been dozing by the fire. The wolf's ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in her chest. In an instant, Benjamin was on his feet, moving to the window. "Riders coming," he said, his voice tense. "3 of them." Madeline's blood ran cold. "Vernon," she whispered. Benjamin grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace. "Get your things. There's a root cellar behind the cabin. If it comes to it, you and Silver can hide there." "I won't leave you to face him alone," Madeline protested. "This is my land, Madeline. I have every right to defend it." Benjamin's expression softened. "But I'd rather avoid bloodshed if possible. Let me talk to them first." The sound of hooves grew louder, and Silver's growl deepened. Madeline grabbed the pistol she kept under her pillow and followed Benjamin onto the porch. Silver limping protectively in front of them both, 3 riders emerged from the trees. In the lead was Vernon Kane, his face twisted with anger when he spotted Madeline on the porch. Behind him rode 2 men Madeline recognized as workers from Vernon's lumber mill, rough men who did whatever Vernon asked without question. "There you are, you ungrateful whore," Vernon snarled, reining in his horse. "Did you think I wouldn't find you? That you could steal from me and get away with it?" Benjamin stepped in front of Madeline, his rifle held casually but ready. "This is private property, gentlemen. I'll have to ask you to mind your language and state your business." Vernon sneered at Benjamin. "My business is with my wife. Stand aside, trapper." "The lady doesn't seem eager to speak with you," Benjamin replied evenly. "And as she's a guest in my home, I'll respect her wishes." Vernon's face darkened with rage. "She's my wife, not your guest. Hand her over, along with what she stole from me, and we'll be on our way." "I didn't steal anything that wasn't rightfully mine," Madeline called out, stepping up beside Benjamin despite his attempt to keep her behind him. "The money was my dowry. The deed has my name on it, too." "You signed away your rights when you married me," Vernon spat. "Now get on this horse before I lose my patience." Silver moved forward, her hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl. Vernon's eyes widened at the sight of the wolf. "That beast is still alive," he exclaimed. "I put a bullet in it myself. And I healed her," Benjamin said, his voice hardening. "Just as I've given shelter to your wife after she fled your abuse. Now I'll say this once more. Leave my property. The lady stays here of her own free will." Vernon's hand moved to his gun. "I'm not leaving without what's mine." "Then you'll leave in a pine box," Benjamin said quietly. "I was a sharpshooter in the war, Mr. Kane. I can put a bullet through your eye before you clear your holster." The 2 men behind Vernon exchanged nervous glances. Clearly, they hadn't signed up for a gunfight with a war veteran. "You're making a mistake, trapper," Vernon warned. "I own half of Ukiah. One word from me and you'll never sell a pelt in town again." "I don't sell in Ukiah," Benjamin replied with a slight shrug. "Sacramento pays better prices." Vernon's face contorted with fury as he realized his threats held no power here. He turned his venomous gaze to Madeline. "This isn't over. You think you're safe here. I'll burn this cabin to the ground with both of you in it." Before Benjamin could respond, Silver launched herself from the porch in a blur of silver fur, snarling as she leapt toward Vernon. The man's horse reared in panic, throwing Vernon to the ground. Silver didn't attack him, merely stood over him, teeth bared inches from his throat. Vernon froze, terror replacing the arrogance in his eyes. His men drew their guns, but Benjamin's rifle was already aimed. "Tell them to lower their weapons," Benjamin ordered Vernon. "Or your widow will be the wealthiest woman in Ukiah. Put them down." Vernon shouted, his voice cracking with fear as Silver's growl deepened. The men slowly holstered their guns. Now, Benjamin continued, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this mountain and never return. You're going to sign divorce papers giving Madeline her freedom and her rightful property. If you don't, I'll make sure every person in Ukiah knows how Vernon Kane was thrown from his horse and nearly killed by a half-healed wolf while threatening a woman. You can't do this, Vernon hissed, but his bravado was gone. I already am, Benjamin replied. Silver, come. To Vernon's visible shock, the wolf immediately backed away, returning to Benjamin's side, though her eyes never left Vernon. You've trained that wild animal? Vernon asked, scrambling to his feet. No, Madeline answered for Benjamin. She chooses to protect those who are kind to her, something you wouldn't understand, Vernon. Vernon brushed dirt from his clothes, trying to regain his dignity. Fine, take the divorce, take the money. But don't think you'll ever be welcome in Ukiah again. I've found somewhere I'm more welcome, Madeline replied, feeling a surge of strength as she stood her ground. Vernon's eyes narrowed as he looked between Madeline and Benjamin. So that's how it is. You've spread your legs for this mountain man. Before Benjamin could react, Madeline raised the pistol and fired, the bullet kicking up dirt inches from Vernon's boot. He jumped back, startled. The next one goes through your foot, Madeline said calmly. Now get on your horse and leave. Vernon glared at her with pure hatred, but the fear in his eyes was stronger. He mounted his horse, his movements stiff with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, he warned. Yes, it is, Benjamin countered. Adam will be watching for those divorce papers in Sacramento. If they're not filed within the month, he'll be contacting the authorities about your threats. And since my brother serves as physician to several influential families, his word carries weight. The mention of Adam, a respected doctor with connections, seemed to finally penetrate Vernon's arrogance. Without another word, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men close behind. When they had disappeared into the trees, Madeline's legs gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, the pistol dropping from her trembling hand. Benjamin was immediately at her side, his arm around her shoulders. You were magnificent, he told her, his voice filled with admiration. Madeline looked up at him, tears and laughter mingling as the tension released. I shot at my husband. You missed, Benjamin pointed out with a small smile. Deliberately, I think? Yes, Madeline admitted, though I was tempted to aim higher. Benjamin laughed, a rich, warm sound that wrapped around Madeline like a blanket. Silver came to sit in front of them, her tail sweeping the dirt in what almost looked like satisfaction. I think, Madeline said slowly, looking from the wolf to Benjamin, that I'd like to stay here if the offer still stands. Benjamin's eyes softened as they met hers. It does. Not as your housekeeper, Madeline clarified. And not yet as more than a friend. I need time, Benjamin. Time to find myself again after being Vernon's possession for so long. Time is something we have plenty of up here, Benjamin replied, his hand covering hers gently. I'm a patient man, Madeline. She turned her hand to clasp his, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength that he used so carefully. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. That night, as they sat by the fire, Silver stretched out between them. Madeline felt the first stirrings of something she had thought lost forever, hope for a future that could include joy, respect, and eventually, love. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall as Madeline made Benjamin's cabin her home. True to his word, Benjamin built a small addition to the cabin, giving Madeline her own room. He never presumed, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Silver's shoulder healed completely, and though she often disappeared into the woods for days at a time, she always returned, as if checking that Madeline was safe and happy. The wolf continued to accompany Benjamin on his trap lines, developing an uncanny ability to lead him to the best spots. Adam visited regularly, bringing news from Sacramento and Ukiah. Vernon had indeed filed the divorce papers, likely more concerned with his reputation than with keeping Madeline as his wife. The papers granted Madeline her dowry money and a small piece of property her parents had included in the marriage settlement. It wasn't much, but it was hers. During those months, Madeline learned the rhythms of the mountain, the skills needed to survive and thrive in the wilderness. Benjamin taught her to shoot accurately, to set snares, to identify edible plants, to read the weather in the sky. She taught him to mend properly, to cook meals more varied than the basic stews he'd lived on, to grow vegetables in the small garden she started. They talked for hours by the fire each evening about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Benjamin spoke of the war, of the horrors he'd witnessed, and the guilt he carried for the lives he'd taken as a sharpshooter. Madeline told him of the isolation and fear of her marriage, of how Vernon had systematically cut her off from everyone who might have helped her. Slowly, the wounds they both carried began to heal, just as Silver's shoulder had healed under their care. It was a crisp October evening when Madeline finally kissed Benjamin Tucker. They had been gathering firewood for the coming winter, the forest around them ablaze with autumn colors. Benjamin had just told a story about his and Adam's childhood exploits that had made Madeline laugh until tears streamed down her face. In that moment, looking at his smile, at the kindness in his eyes, at the man who had saved her and Silver without asking for anything in return, Madeline had simply stepped forward and pressed her lips to his. Benjamin had gone still for a moment, then his arms had come around her gently, returning the kiss with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since July," he admitted. Madeline smiled. "I've been wanting you to since August." After that, their relationship deepened naturally, without rush or pressure. Benjamin continued to give Madeline the space she needed, understanding that recovering from Vernon's abuse would take time. But now there were kisses by the fire, hands held during walks in the woods, and the growing certainty that what they felt for each other was real and lasting. Winter arrived with heavy snows that transformed the mountains into a glistening wonderland. The cabin was snug and warm, with ample supplies to see them through until spring. Silver came and went as she pleased, somehow managing to find gaps in the snowdrifts or creating her own tunnels. It was during the season's first blizzard, as wind howled around the cabin and snow piled against the windows, that Madeline went to Benjamin's bed. He welcomed her with reverence, his touch healing the last of the wounds Vernon had inflicted on her soul. In Benjamin's arms, Madeline rediscovered parts of herself she had thought destroyed forever: her capacity for passion, for joy, for complete trust in another person. Afterward, lying with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home. "I love you," she told him simply. Benjamin's arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Madeline. I think I have since the moment I saw you standing in those woods, pointing a pistol at me to protect a wolf." Madeline laughed softly. "We make quite a pair, don't we?" "We make a family," Benjamin corrected, stroking her hair. "You, me, and that silver shadow that comes and goes as she pleases." As if summoned by his words, they heard scratching at the door. Benjamin pulled on his clothes and opened it to find Silver, covered in snow, waiting patiently to be let in. The wolf shook herself, sending powder flying, then padded to the bed where she settled on the floor beside Madeline. "See," Benjamin said, returning to bed and gathering Madeline close. "A family." The next morning, the blizzard having blown itself out, Benjamin and Madeline ventured outside to check the damage. The world was transformed, buried under feet of pristine snow. As they stood on the porch, Silver suddenly lifted her head, ears pricked toward the forest. "What is it, girl?" Madeline asked, immediately alert for danger. Silver bounded off the porch and disappeared into the trees. Benjamin and Madeline exchanged glances, then quickly dressed for the cold and followed the wolf's tracks. They found her about a quarter-mile from the cabin, standing over the body of another wolf, a male with dark gray fur. At first, Madeline feared the animal was dead, but as they approached, she saw the shallow rise and fall of its chest. Like Silver had been nearly a year earlier, this wolf had been shot, the blood bright crimson against the snow. "Hunters," Benjamin said grimly, kneeling to examine the wound. "Likely thought he was after their livestock." "Can we help him?" Madeline asked, already knowing what Benjamin would say. "We can try," he replied, carefully lifting the injured wolf, "but he's lost a lot of blood." They carried the wolf back to the cabin, where Benjamin extracted the bullet while Madeline prepared the same herbal poultices they had used on Silver. Throughout the procedure, Silver never left the male wolf's side, occasionally licking his muzzle as if encouraging him to hold on. They know each other, Madeline realized, watching the interaction. "They're a pair," Benjamin nodded. That would explain why Silver kept disappearing for days at a time. She wasn't just roaming, she was visiting him. For 3 days, they tended the injured wolf, but the wound had become infected before they found him. Despite their best efforts, on the 4th morning, they woke to find him gone, with Silver nowhere to be seen. Following tracks in the fresh snow, they discovered the male wolf had died during the night, and Silver had dragged his body deep into the forest. They found her lying beside her mate, her muzzle resting on his still flank. When she saw Benjamin and Madeline, she rose and came to them, pressing against Madeline's legs as if seeking comfort. "Oh, Silver," Madeline whispered, kneeling to embrace the wolf. "I'm so sorry." Benjamin stood silently for a moment, then began to gather stones. Understanding his intention, Madeline helped, and together they built a cairn over the fallen wolf, protecting his body from scavengers. When they had finished, Silver sat beside the grave, lifting her muzzle in a mournful howl that echoed through the silent forest. That night, as they sat by the fire, Silver between them as always, Benjamin took Madeline's hand. "Watching Silver grieve made me realize something," he said quietly. "Life is short and uncertain. I don't want to waste any more time." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a simple ring carved from pale wood. "I've been working on this for months," he admitted. "It's not gold or diamonds, but it's perfect," Madeline interrupted, her heart swelling with love for this man who understood her so well. A ring from nature, crafted by his own hands, meant infinitely more to her than any expensive bauble. "Madeline Kane," Benjamin said, holding the ring out to her, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need protection or shelter, but because I want to spend whatever years I have on this earth with you by my side." Tears filled Madeline's eyes as she held out her hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Benjamin Tucker." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. Silver, who had been watching the exchange with those intelligent eyes, let out a soft whine and pressed closer to them both, as if offering her approval. When spring finally melted the snow, Benjamin and Madeline were married in a simple ceremony performed by a circuit preacher who had been a friend of Benjamin's father. Adam stood as witness, beaming with happiness for his brother. Silver watched from the edge of the clearing, her silver coat gleaming in the dappled sunlight. As the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, a small miracle occurred. From the trees emerged 3 wolf pups, tumbling over each other as they raced to join Silver. The adults watched in amazement as the pups frolicked around Silver, who seemed to be herding them toward the humans. She had pups, Madeline gasped, tears of joy filling her eyes. Her mate's pups. A wedding gift, Benjamin said, his voice rough with emotion as he squeezed Madeline's hand. A new family to match our own. Over the years that followed, the Tucker family thrived in their mountain home. Benjamin expanded the cabin as their family grew first with the birth of their son James in 1875, followed by twin daughters Elizabeth and Sarah in 1877. The children grew up wild and free, with Silver and her offspring as playmates and protectors. Madeline never returned to Ukiah, though Adam brought news occasionally. Vernon Kane had remarried, a young woman from San Francisco who had a substantial fortune of her own. Madeline felt only pity for the woman, hoping she would find the strength to escape as Madeline had done with the money from her divorce settlement. Madeline and Benjamin purchased additional land surrounding their cabin, creating a sanctuary where hunting was forbidden. The wolf pack flourished there, with Silver as its undisputed leader. As the children grew older, Benjamin taught them his skills tracking, trapping, shooting, survival. Madeline taught them to read and write, to sew and cook, to identify healing plants and treat injuries. Both parents instilled in their children respect for nature and all its creatures. Silver remained a constant presence, though as the years passed, she grew older, her muzzle turning white, her steps slowing. She no longer followed Benjamin on his trap lines but stayed close to the cabin, watching over the children with vigilant eyes. In the autumn of 1883, 10 years after Madeline had fled her abusive marriage, Silver disappeared for several days. When she returned, she was noticeably weaker, limping badly on her old injured shoulder. She came directly to Madeline, who was hanging laundry in the yard and pressed against her legs as she had done so many times before. "What is it, old friend?" Madeline asked, kneeling to stroke the wolf's silver fur. Silver whined softly, then turned and walked slowly toward the forest, looking back as if asking Madeline to follow. Understanding dawned, bringing with it a sharp pain in Madeline's chest. She called for Benjamin, and together they followed Silver into the woods. The wolf led them to a sun-dappled clearing not far from where they had buried her mate years earlier. There, she circled once, twice, then lay down with a sigh, her eyes fixed on Madeline. Tears streaming down her face, Madeline knelt beside the wolf who had changed the course of her life. "Thank you," she whispered, gathering Silver's head into her lap just as she had done the day Vernon shot her. "Thank you for leading me to freedom, for leading me to love." Benjamin knelt on Silver's other side, his hand gentle on her flank. "Rest easy, old girl," he said, his voice thick. "You've earned it." They stayed with Silver as the afternoon faded to evening, speaking softly of all the years they had shared. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Silver took a last, shuddering breath, her eyes locked with Madeline's, and was gone. They buried her in that clearing, building a cairn like the one that marked her mate's resting place. Benjamin carved a wooden marker with a single word, Silver, and the date. Below it, he added, "Spirit guide, protector, friend." That night, as they held each other in their bed, the children sleeping peacefully in their rooms, Madeline whispered, "She saved my life, Benjamin." "In every way a life can be saved." "She saved us both," Benjamin replied, kissing Madeline's forehead. "She led me out of my solitude as surely as she led you out of your prison." "You think?" Madeline hesitated, then continued, "You think she was just a wolf, or something more?" Benjamin was silent for a long moment. "I think," he said finally, "that there are mysteries in this world we aren't meant to fully understand, But I believe Silver came into your life for a purpose, and that purpose led you to me." Madeline smiled through her tears. "And to James and the girls. To this life we've built together. A life we'll continue building," Benjamin promised, "for many years to come." As if in answer, from somewhere in the distant forest, a wolf howled, one of Silver's offspring, carrying on her legacy. The sound floated through the open window, a reminder that Silver's spirit lived on in the wilderness she had loved, and in the hearts of those she had protected. In the years that followed, the Tucker family continued to flourish. James grew into a fine young man who combined his father's quiet strength with his mother's compassionate heart. The twins, Elizabeth and Sarah, were as different as sisters could be. Elizabeth serious and studious, Sarah wild and adventurous, but both possessed a deep connection to the natural world that surrounded them. The wolf pack that Silver had started remained on their land, neither fully tame nor truly wild, existing in harmony with the human family that protected their territory. Occasionally, one of the wolves would approach the cabin, accepting food from Madeline's hand, or allowing the children to stroke its fur, moments that always reminded Madeline of Silver. Benjamin and Madeline's love deepened with each passing year. The wooden ring he had carved for her remained on her finger, though he later added a gold band beside it, a gift for their 10th anniversary, purchased with the proceeds from a particularly successful season of trapping. They faced challenges, of course. Harsh winters that tested their supplies and resolve. Illness that swept through the family one terrible spring, nearly taking Sarah from them. Pressure from expanding settlements that pushed closer to their mountain sanctuary each year. But they faced each trial together, drawing strength from each other and from the legacy of courage that Silver had left them. On a warm summer evening in 1898, 25 years after Madeline had fled her first husband with an injured wolf at her side, the extended Tucker family gathered outside their expanded cabin. James had returned from college in San Francisco with his new wife, a bright-eyed young woman who had already won Madeline's heart. Elizabeth, now teaching at a school in Sacramento, had brought her fiancé to meet her parents. Sarah, who had inherited her father's love of the wilderness, had just returned from a season as a guide for wealthy tourists in Yosemite. Adam, now retired from his medical practice but still sharp as ever, entertained everyone with stories of his travels. Benjamin, his hair now more silver than brown, sat with his arm around Madeline, watching their family with quiet pride. As twilight settled over the mountains, a wolf appeared at the edge of the clearing, a magnificent female with a coat that shone silver in the fading light, so like her ancestor that Madeline's breath caught in her throat. "Look," she whispered to Benjamin, "Silver's great-granddaughter." The wolf regarded the human gathering calmly, then lifted her muzzle and howled a sound that seemed to bridge the years, connecting past and present, loss and hope, endings and beginnings. Benjamin squeezed Madeline's hand, the same hand that had once held a pistol to defend a wounded wolf, the hand that had later caressed his face in love, that had cradled their children and grandchildren. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" he asked softly. Madeline leaned against his shoulder, thinking of the frightened young woman she had once been, of the journey that had brought her to this moment of contentment. "The best life," she replied, "more than I ever dared to dream." As night fell fully, the family moved indoors, leaving the wolf to disappear back into the forest that had always been the source of their strength and salvation. Madeline lingered for a moment on the porch, looking up at the star-filled sky. "Thank you, Silver," she whispered to the spirit of the wolf who had changed her destiny. "For everything." From the distant hills came an answering howl. carried on the gentle summer breeze, not an ending, but a continuation of a story that would live as long as wolves ran free in the mountains, and as long as people told tales of courage, rescue, and love that defied all obstacles.